Darkseid is one of the most powerful beings in the DC universe, and his most powerful attack is his Omega Beams. Now, these beams can come from his eyes or his hands, and they have absolutely devastating power. In most cases, they disintegrate a person instantly, but there are some invulnerable characters who have survived being hit by them, such as Superman, Shazam, and Doomsday, though it does still really mess them up. And the power of the beams isn't the only problem. They also lock onto a person and follow them if they try to avoid them, and only a few people have ever managed to dodge this attack, and this video is going to go over them. Batman. Batman dodging this attack is perhaps the most impressive. After all, everyone else who dodges Darkseid's Omega Beams uses their superpowers to do so, but Batman instead just uses his reflexes and skill. And when Darkseid shoots his beams at him, Batman knows that they're going to lock onto him, and that the only way to stop them is to make them hit another target. So he dodges them by landing on a Parademon and letting the Parademon get hit instead. Now, it does have to be said that this isn't canon, and it's only in the Justice League TV show. In fact, in the comics, Batman actually has been hit by Darkseid's Omega Beams during the Final Crisis comic event, and most of the DC Universe actually thought that he had died. Although it was later revealed that the beams can not only destroy a person, but they can also transport them to another space and time, which is what happened to Batman. It's also worth noting that in the Justice League TV universe, Batman is the only person to ever dodge Darkseid's Omega Beams. Supergirl. In the film Superman Batman Apocalypse, Darkseid ambushes Superman and Supergirl in Kansas, and a bloody fight ensues, and Darkseid shoots several bursts of Omega Beams at Supergirl, and so she decides to lead all of these beams back around to Darkseid, and she then grabs Darkseid and throws the god into the beams of energy, striking him with his own power. And though he's strong enough to not be disintegrated, it still deals an immense amount of damage to him, and it's actually a very clever move on her part. After all, if they're going to follow you and they've got to hit something, might as well make them hit the bad guy. Though sadly, it's not actually enough for her to win the fight, as Darkseid still manages to overpower her. Though in the comic version of this story, Supergirl gets hit by the Omega Beams and turns to dust. Though it is later revealed that she was actually teleported away at the last second, which doesn't really make much sense to me, as she still gets hit by the beam and we see her die. But apparently you can get teleported out of the way at the last second, and then you can dodge the attack, at least to a certain degree, as Supergirl still gets hurt, but she's taken away just before she dies. Personally, I've always thought this one was just kinda bad writing, if I'm honest. The Flash. The Barry Allen version of the Flash is the fastest man alive, so him dodging the Omega Beams does make sense. But he actually didn't outrun the beams using his super speed. Instead, he, like the others, provided them with a different target. The Flash did try to outrun them with super speed initially, but he couldn't. Even his great speed wasn't enough to outrace them. So in the film Justice League War, he ran by a group of Parademons, and he ran so close to them that the beams got confused, so the beams hit all the Parademons instead of him, and used up all of their energy, thus saving the Flash. The Flash also says that this is actually the first time that he's ever had to catch his breath, which just goes to show how fast he was running. And in the Justice League comic version of this story, he used his power to phase through objects, and ran straight through a Parademon, and the beams followed his path and destroyed the Parademon instead of him. And of all of the dodges, I actually think that this one makes the most sense. After all, the beams lock onto targets and avoid all other obstacles, so even if you move close to another obstacle, it doesn't really make sense that it would hit them instead. I mean, I can believe it could get confused, but it's not 100% perfect as a way around it. But phasing through a solid object is a great way around it. After all, the beam would still follow your path, but you phase through an object, but the beam can't, so it would just hit whatever you're phasing through. It also means that anyone with the power to phase, such as Martian Manhunter, and pretty much most of the Martians, should be able to dodge Darkseid's beams in the same way. Though I doubt they could actually phase through the beams themselves, as the power of the Omega effect would probably still hurt them. The Flash has also dodged these beams on other occasions, and used them to actually attack Darkseid. In the comic event Final Crisis, both the Wally West version of the Flash and the Barry Allen version of the Flash get the Omega Beams to follow them, and then they lead them straight to Darkseid and run at the speed of light so that the beams strike Darkseid instead of them. Although I think the Flash can actually use his other powers to avoid the Omega Beams as well. After all, he can travel through time. So if he just ran a few seconds or a few minutes into the future, as he has done before to avoid attacks, then he'd probably be able to dodge the beam as well, as it does seem unlikely that they could keep locked on and track him through time. It's not impossible, of course, but it does seem unlikely. And finally, in the same Justice League War film, the Flash does actually manage to avoid other Omega Beam attacks as well, just by moving out of the way. And this seems to be either a detail that's overlooked by the filmmakers so they can make a quick action scene that looks good, or possibly these attacks are not the full-on Omega Beam attack that Darkseid used before, but something weaker. But to be completely honest, I think the filmmakers just overlooked this and took a little artistic license to make a good action sequence. Robin. Now, this one is a little flimsy in my opinion. In the Total Justice comic book, Robin reasons that Darkseid controls the Omega Beams with his mind. And this means that once Robin is out of Darkseid's line of sight, Darkseid can no longer guide the beams into hitting him. So the beam is still locked on, but it can be tricked. So he digs a deep hole to be out of Darkseid's line of sight, and then he falls down it, and the beam misses him because, although it is locked on, it doesn't have a perfect accuracy, and so it carries on. Now, to be honest, I've never really understood how that works, because the beam just seems to miss him for no real reason. He doesn't even really seem to jump out of the way. He just jumps in a hole and then the beam doesn't turn and carries on. And in my opinion, I think this one is just poor writing, especially since the beams never seem to depend on Darkseid's line of sight to track their targets in any other versions. But still, Robin does manage to dodge this attack, so it does have to be mentioned, even if it makes little to no sense. And they are all the people who have dodged this attack, or at least all the ones that I could find in my research. But if there are any others that you know of, then please let us know in the comments. Along with whether you think Batman's dodge makes sense as well. After all, if Superman couldn't outmaneuver the Omega Beams with his super speed, then it does seem a little odd that Batman could just jump out of the way. Not to mention the fact that the Flash did use the same tactic, but he had to move at super speeds in order to dodge the beam. Although to be fair, the power of Darkseid's Omega Beams does vary from different continuities. After all, in some, Superman can carry on with the fight after being hit by the beams and is just a bit damaged, but in Justice League War, it seems to damn near kill him. And by now I'm sure you've realised that no one can really dodge the Omega Beams outright, because the beams lock onto a person, and once they're fired, they have to hit something. So the only real way to dodge this attack is to get the beams to hit something or someone else. And failing that, the only other option is to be strong enough to withstand the blast. And while a few invulnerable characters can survive the attack, only a few are actually powerful enough to block the attack altogether without taking any damage. Such as Mxyzptlk. In the comic one-shot Superman and Batman World's Funniest, Mxyzptlk is fighting Darkseid, and Darkseid shoots his Omega Beams at him. And it does hit him, but it does nothing to him except light his cigar. And so it seems that he uses his magic to negate the beam's effect. So his magic kind of makes the beam not hit him. And of course, in the Emperor Joker storyline, the Joker gets Mixie's powers as well, and he is able to defeat Darkseid with ease. So he too can of course withstand Darkseid's Omega Beams, at least while he has these god powers. And along with them, the Spectre has used his magic to withstand the beam's attack, and Galactus has also been hit in a Marvel DC crossover, but again it didn't really seem to do much to him as he was able to use his powers to negate its effect. But you don't have to have their god powers to block the beams, as they have been blocked by Wonder Woman. Now Wonder Woman has never actually been able to dodge Darkseid's attack, but it doesn't really matter because she is able to block it, and she has done so on multiple occasions. In the Justice League War film, she uses her sword, which is likely imbued with magic, to stop the beams in their tracks. And in the Justice League comic storyline, she does the same, only using her magic bracelets to block the blast instead. Which does actually make more sense than her using her sword to block it. After all, she's been using her bracelets to stop attacks since pretty much forever. And they were forged by the gods, so it does make sense that they'd be able to stop the attack, because they're imbued with some powerful magic. And since she's used these bracelets to stop Darkseid's attacks on several occasions, this does actually seem to be canon for the DC universe. But she's not the only one in the Justice League who has actually stopped Darkseid's Omega Beams, as they have also been stopped by Green Lantern. In the Justice League War film, Green Lantern uses his ring to create a shield that stops Darkseid's attack and then redirects it back at him. Now you could count this as a dodge as he does avoid getting hit, but really I think it counts as blocking the attack, as he doesn't so much get out of the way, but uses his ring to slingshot the attack back at Darkseid. So in theory, anyone with a Green Lantern ring could stop Darkseid's Omega Beams, if their willpower is strong enough. Though again, this is only in the film, and is most likely not canon for the comic DC universe. Though with that being said, it is true in the comic universe that if your willpower is strong enough, there's very little a Green Lantern ring can't do. So if someone like Mogo was hit with Darkseid's attack, he'd probably be able to stop it quite easily. And though this video was actually about dodging Darkseid's attack, I thought that being able to block the Omega Beams was also worth going over, if only briefly. And if you do know of any other characters that can completely block Darkseid's attack, then please feel free to let us know in the comments. And I'd just like to say a quick thank you to those who made this video possible by donating to the Needle Mouse Productions page on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.